Welcome to Webcast, the home of extreme medicine. I'm Mark Hannaford, the founder of World Extreme Medicine. In this episode, we have the pleasure of being joined by Dr. Shawna Pandya, a physician, an aquanaut, a martial artist, a pilot, an aspiring astronaut with her eyes firmly set on space, the moon, and possibly even Mars. So, Shawna, it's absolutely brilliant to get to talk to you again. I know how busy you are right at the moment with your clinical work. But you have the most extraordinary career and drive towards your ambition and your goal. And I thought it would be great to be able to catch up with you and share some of your insights and sort of some of your learnings with the people who listen to this podcast. First off, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much, Mark, for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. You've had some amazing guests on this podcast, so I'm honored to be amongst them now. So, for those who don't know me, my name is Dr. Shawna Pandya. I'm a physician in general practice and ER from Canada, and I also have a interest in space and space medicine. So, I am a citizen scientist astronaut candidate with a not-for-profit astronautics group called Project Possum. We do really cool stuff like test spacesuits in zero gravity and in water crash landing scenarios. I'm an aquanaut. I'm a researcher, speaker, pilot, martial artist, skydiver, scuba diver. It's quite a long, fun list. And I'm also the VP of Immersive Medicine at Luxonic Technologies, which is a VR AR technology development group.
That is one CV that you just sort of reeled off there. Um, and it'll be interesting to explore how those different elements all fit into each other. When you were younger, did you want to be a doctor? Was that your defined career path, or did you have a slightly wider view of where you wanted to be?
Yeah, definitely. I had a bit of a wider view. I like a lot of kids, I wanted to be an astronaut, but I just never really grew out of it. And I grew up in the 90s in the era of the Canadian shuttle astronauts. And so the first Canadian woman in space was Dr. Roberta Bonder. And I just looked at her career and I was so inspired by everything she did. And that really set the stage for me for everything I did next because she was a physician, a neuro-ophthalmologist, and an astronaut. So I thought, okay, well, there's my path. I will go be a physician. It's what inspired me to do my first degree in neuroscience. It's what made me want to be a neurosurgeon when I was in high school, and then ultimately be an astronaut. So definitely the space interest was what came first, and then medicine followed.
And you've also got quite an interest. In fact, we met whilst we were running a course on the remarkable Aquarius Reef Base in Florida, which of course is used for NASA as analog training for the International Space Station. Diving and being outdoors has always been part of your biography as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that course was a dream because Aquarius Reef Base, where the NASA NEMO or NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operations missions are run, it's one of the world's only undersea laboratories. And so to be able to spend a night there was definitely a bucket list item. And then, like you say, I've always been interested in the outdoors. I grew up being a Girl Guide here in Canada. I did outdoor ed. We did everything from, your basic sleeping out in a tent and camping to taking younger kids. And we were as young as 14 when we were leading these kids on camping trips and teaching them how to camp, to the more fun stuff like building a quinzhee out of snow and digging it out and sleeping in it, building a lean-to, lots of fun experiences growing up that really teach you about what it means to be in the outdoors, what it means to build a team, even if it's a team of two that you're a team of four that you're going camping with, and teaching that love of outdoors to others.
Do you think that love of outdoors and working in teams has actually impacted and improved your clinical career?
I would say it definitely has, and it's actually come full circle because now that I'm an attending physician, I'm really coming back to wanting to be in these environments again, and that's where this whole love of extreme medicine, extreme environment medicine comes in. It's they feed into each other. Definitely, it spurred how I approach medicine, trying to be resourceful, trying to do what I can with what I have, and then also bring that mentality back to the outdoors to provide medical care there.
And do you think, inevitably working in the outdoors, generally you're working as either a small group of people, but we're working generally in a team on an expedition? Has it improved your ability to lead teams and to communicate with people in a clinical setting and with indeed your patients as well?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that actually kind of spurred my adult camping trips, which by which I mean my analog missions into ice or isolated and confined extreme environments. And it's just been a natural evolution, which then feeds back into everyday life. And so, for those who are unfamiliar with the term, space is really, really hard. It's dangerous and it's expensive. And so we need to train as much and know as much about interacting in such an environment before we actually go to space. And so the camping trips, quote unquote, that I've done in adult life have been to these ice environments. So I've been to the Mars Desert Research Station, which is real life on fake Mars. I've been there twice. So that's in the middle of the Utah desert. It's a Mars habitat. And then I've also done an underwater analog aquanaut mission at the Jules Undersea Lodge. And it's sort of exactly like we were talking about. It's that mentality of, building your team, building your crew, trying to, do what's best for the mission and the team, and taking those lessons learned from, what started off as an innocent camping trip as as a kid. And definitely those lessons have made me a better team member. And then, like you were saying, it comes back into everyday medicine when I'm, communicating with my small teams in the ER. It's the exact same. It's the exact same mentality. We're trying to achieve a common goal. We're trying to communicate clearly, and we're trying to do what's best for the mission, which in this case is patient care.
In terms of those analog missions and the isolation of the missions themselves, what's for you been personally the biggest challenge about those deployments?
Oh gosh, it's hard to say. I think it's challenging for sure. We don't, it's, if it were easy, I think more people would do it. But I wouldn't say it's challenging in a positive way. There's a term in psychology, in positive psychology, called salutogenesis, and it's looking at that growth mindset. It's looking at what what positive attributes does challenge and hardship and challenging environments offer. And so, you can look at it one way and say, oh, this is going to be challenging. I'm going to be away from my friends and family and loved ones. I'm not going to have immediate communications in certain cases. Where we're confined indoors, and if we go outdoors, we have to wear protective gear, whether it's simulated life, whether it's simulated spacesuits or whether it's dive gear. So there are challenges in that respect, but it's never, I think if you focus on that as in, oh my God, this is going to be so hard, you're really setting yourself back at the starting line. And I would say that, for me, I've always viewed this as this is going to be fun. Let's see how this goes. I'm doing this with a team that I highly respect. That's like family at this point, and so I've never gone into this saying, "Oh gosh, this is going to be so hard." And don't get me wrong, like there's a lot of planning, a lot of logistics that goes into this. Um, and so for our Neptune, that was our underwater mission, which stands for Nautical Experiments in Physiology, Technology, and Underwater Exploration. Um, we designed the science. We designed the scientific experiment. We designed all the parameters that we would measure. We put that through the IRB. We did the revisions. It wasn't easy, but it was still the entire team looked at that as a positive challenge. So I think that's maybe a good life lesson that, how you view something also determines your um maybe your probability of success, I would say.
And are you the type of person that needs a challenge in order to set your course?
I personally never would have phrased it that way, but I'm smiling because I would say every single person that knows me would phrase it that way. So, yeah, I'm extremely, extremely ambitious, I'm told. So I would say, based on what others have told me, yes, and I'm always trying to push that limit. I'm always trying to, set really big goals. And when I've reached that one, I say, hey, that's awesome. Okay, but now where do we go to next?
And how are you? So how are you? And I guess I'm asking this question because I'm very similarly focused. How are you dealing with lockdown? I know you're busy with your clinical career, but how are you dealing with the frustration of not being able to have freedom of movement and travel?
Yeah, for me, I think this comes back. This is an extension of what we were talking about in that, how you view something definitely will affect how you cope with it. And for me, so the art of reframing, looking for the silver lining in any situation is extraordinarily important. And so yeah, you can say, like, for me, I was scheduled to be traveling pretty much every week until June and beyond, and then a month break, and then more of the same for 2020, and obviously all of that has been canceled now. So you can look at it and say, oh gosh, everything has been turned on its head. But really, I'm taking this time as a kind of braincation, in that the amount of academic work, the amount of just intellectual work that I've had the luxury of being able to commit to during this time, I'm very, very grateful for. So I've been given the gift of time, which has always been at a premium for me. And I'm not, I'm very grateful for that, and I don't want to squander that opportunity. So I would actually say I'm busier than normal, or maybe as busy as usual during this time. Running till late in the night, doing various things like writing papers, um, you know, working on new collaborations, whether it's space medicine, whether it's COVID. Um, so I think there's a way to view. For me, I've been viewing quarantine. I've been with gratitude, and that's not to say that I don't want to be insensitive to people who do not have that luxury, because I absolutely know there are people who are struggling financially, with mental health, who even with people who just have kids, and are trying to go about their workday at home. It's very, very challenging, and I want to acknowledge that. But for me, I've been very, very lucky to invest more time in intellectual pursuits during the pandemic.
Let me just dig into that reframing phrase that you use then, and I appreciate how valuable that is. How dogmatic are you about using that? Do you use that on a daily basis? Do you use it at work? Or is it a slightly more expansive model?
Yeah, I would say at this point in my life, I am so it's so innately ingrained in me. I don't actually actively ask myself, how do we reframe this? Because I think I'm subconsciously doing it at every turn. So, for example, whether it's a medical trauma that didn't go well, whether it's a flying lesson that didn't go well, whether it's with a jump out of an airplane that didn't go well. Um, at every turn, I've learned the value and the art of debriefing, because the lesson is, there's a way to be hard on yourself that's productive, and there's a way to be hard on yourself that's destructive. And you can say, oh my God, I'm horrible, I suck, I didn't get the outcome I wanted. Or you can say, why didn't I get the outcome I wanted? What sequence of events did I personally do, acknowledging my role in all of this, and what needs to change for next time so I have a better outcome, and how do I do that? And so that's one aspect of reframing. And then the other part that's become really innate is just, and I think this is probably something that's been lifelong, is just gratitude. There's always, always, always something to be grateful for. And so the more you practice these two, I guess, philosophies, these two mental strategies, just trying to be grateful for something and trying to debrief constructively, I think those fall into the toolkit of being able to reframe. And for me, I've just been doing it so long, I would say that they're almost innate at this point.
In your clinical setting, how often do you get the opportunity to debrief? And and how valuable is that for you and your team?
Yeah, that's a great question, because you've touched on something that I would posit that we definitely need to do better, and that we need to make a conscious effort to bring into medicine, because there you know we in aviation we debrief extensively, in skydiving we debrief, and we debrief extensively in the scientist astronaut astronautics group I'm with. Before every microgravity flight campaign, we pre-brief and then we debrief extensively as a group. But we don't in medicine. And really, when you try to do that, it's viewed as something that's out of the norm. And it's viewed as, just another thing for us to do on top of our busy day. And so I really, really try to bring that practice into medicine. It's not universal, and I hope that someday it will be, because there's so much value in learning. And the excuse that we as doctors give is that we're so busy, we don't have time. But really, when we look at our ultimate goal, which is good patient care and safe patient care, I would argue that we have to make the time, because we're not doing our job if we don't take every corrective action to debrief. So definitely, I work a lot of rural ER. I work with a lot of small teams. Even if it's just if even if it's not a formal debrief, but in passing saying, "Hey, that was great the way you did that," or "Hey, this could be, maybe we should do it this way in the future." There's always a role for debriefing, and we need to make a concerted effort to bring that skill set into medicine, I would say.
It's come out of various conversations that we've had at the WEM conference and other places, that there are a number of these key interpersonal skills that actually we should be taught at a pre-university level. So debriefing, gratitude, mental fitness, and awareness. That actually, if we arrived in our university careers or our jobs with those skills already built in as part of the education system, we would actually probably perform and also be mentally more robust.
Yeah, absolutely. I spend a lot of time thinking about this, actually. If I ran a school, what would I teach young kids? And those are definitely on the list. Critical thinking, emotional intelligence, mental resilience, all of that, they go on the list. There's definitely a lot of things that we can, life skills wise, including discipline and organization, that we can be teaching kids to set them up for success in adulthood.
And I know emotional intelligence is something that you're very passionate about, but it's quite an easy phrase to say. To, for you, what does that phrase mean, and how do you demonstrate it?
So the way I view that is being the adult in the room, and it's hard. It's hard when a situation is stressful, when people are very emotionally invested and passionate about what they're debating about. Particularly when we look at the current geopolitical um, circumstance of how politics is evolving or devolving across the planet. People are becoming increasingly polarized, and that's why I would argue it's more important than ever to learn to detach. And so when I look at emotional intelligence, I for me it means being able to take a step back from your immediate emotional response, and then not have that knee jerk emotional response. So, for example, if you feel angry, the knee jerk response may be to yell at someone. But if you take that step back and say, "Hey, I feel angry. I acknowledge I feel angry. Why do I feel angry? What's a constructive way to deal with this?" So, being able to detach from your feelings, and maybe name the feelings for what they are, and then ultimately come up with an action oriented response to conflict and negative emotions, rather than coming up with an emotionally oriented response. And in fact, there's some data around this. One of my favorite books about psychology and human spaceflight is by a gentleman by the name of Nick Canis, and he actually shows some data from previous spaceflight that shows that conflict resolution went much better when people reacted with action oriented responses rather than emotionally oriented responses.
And in terms of that emotional intelligence and the techniques that you've learned and be innate in yourself anyway, how important is that as a factor in your everyday medical and clinical life?
Yeah, it's extremely important. It's important for, in medicine, I think we're just now starting to look at aspects of physician burnout, and mental wellness. And it's not an easy profession. We work long hours, we deal with hard things, life and death. And I think it's been this a long time coming, and it's been a slow evolution towards this is just the way it is, towards, oh hey, we need to keep the people who are well, whose job it is to keep other people well, if we can keep the system going, to the next thing is, oh, you should be resilient, to, oh, maybe the system doesn't predispose you to being resilient and the system needs to change as well. So I think about it in everything I do. And one thing we haven't talked about yet is psychological resilience, and how that factors into any aspect of life, whether it's living in an ice environment, whether it's medicine. And I'm a big proponent of this because the data shows. So to take a step back, mental resilience is, that fortitude, that grit, that ability to bounce back when things are tough, and the ability to, to keep going, and maybe deal with difficult circumstances in a constructive way. And so psychological resilience or mental grit or whatever you call it, it's easy to think that, oh, some people are born with it and some people, just aren't, and that's the way it is. But the data actually shows that resilience can be learned, and it can be broken down into 5 key traits. So mental rehearsal, impulse control, positive self-talk, positive social supports, and then breaking things down. And so knowing that these are learnable traits, actually, we can work on ourselves to make ourselves more resilient. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's not like deciding to lift weights and going from 0 to 250 overnight. It's a step by step process. But it really matters in medicine, because medicine can be very hard. And learning to make ourselves resilient sets us up for long term well-being in a field that can have a lot of burnout and a lot of issues with wellness. And then when we're well, we can do our job for the team. We can be there for our teammates, our colleagues across the profession, and most importantly, the patients.
A lot of young medics will be listening to this interview, wondering how they can follow some of the steps that you've taken. And clearly, you're going in a very specific direction. Lots of them will want to work in humanitarian missions, take part in expeditions, perhaps do military medicine. If as a young medic, what would be your 5 top tips in terms of how they should approach their career at an early stage?
Yeah, I think there's maybe two things is, how do you achieve really big things, and also how do you deal with maybe tough scenarios. And I would say, based on my experience, set really big goals, because if you limit yourself to start with, you're not going to get there. So don't limit yourself when it comes to ambition and dream. But then secondly, set a goal to get there, because an ambition without a plan is just a dream. It's not a goal. So then set steps to get there with respect to your roadmap. And then also the next thing is, develop a work ethic, develop the best work ethic of anyone you know. So talent maybe not be something that all of us have, but work ethic is 100% something all of us can develop. And then, the value of people. No one achieves success on their own. When you're looking at astronauts on the International Space Station, they're just the tip of the spear. It's mission control. It's the engineers who built the launch system. It's the families who supported them along the way. So no man, no woman is an island. So be grateful for the people that you have, and then surround yourself by good people. And also keep up with that positive self-talk, because if you're trying to do really hard things, it's not going to be a smooth road the entire way. Keep up that positive self-talk, but also, when there's tough times, debrief constructively. So I would say those are my top tips for aiming big and for doing really hard things.
You've developed a very sophisticated sort of backup to enable your ambitions. Before you started embarking on your voyage, were there icons and people that influenced you in terms of wanting to emulate them? And I know Canada itself has an incredibly rich heritage in its astronauts in terms of what they've achieved as individuals, but obviously as astronauts in space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really I love reading about the careers of the astronauts in Canada because it's not just they're an astronaut, but it's a whole mentality. Because when you look at what it is that they've achieved, throughout their lifetimes, before being selected, while they were selected, and even afterwards, it's the level of accomplishments is almost defies imagination. And so, for example, we look at David Saint-Jacques, who opened WEM last year from the ISS. He is a Canadian physician. He's a PhD in astrophysics. He's a master's in electrical engineering from Cambridge, I think. He's a commercial pilot. Like, he had this incredible resume before being selected as an astronaut. He just pursued excellence. And then, someone like Chris Hadfield, who was commander of the International Space Station, he went above and beyond the call of duty. He would outreach. He would, sing, David Bowie on the space station. And then looking at what the astronauts have gone on to do post retirement from the Canadian Space Agency. They've gone on to become governor general, chancellor of a university, member of parliament. It's not just I'm only doing this to be an astronaut. I'm doing this because in the pursuit of excellence and for the pursuit of good for all. And so even if your ambition isn't to be an astronaut, or if your ambition is to be an astronaut and you maybe still on that path or you don't get there, it's the pursuit of excellence and the pursuit of good for widespread impact, I think, are the lessons that we can take away from looking at these amazing individuals, and being inspired by them.
When's the next Canadian astronaut selection process going to be? Because I'm pretty sure I know the first person who's going to be in the queue.
Yeah, so in Canada, while we do work very closely with the US, we have only had 4 selections to date. NASA has obviously had a lot more. So we've had selections, I think, in 83, 92, 2009, and 2016. So right now, NASA just wrapped up a selection in March. So maybe does that bode for something coming down the Canadian pipeline? I'm not sure, but you can be sure I will apply when the next Canadian selection opens up. Because to represent my country, represent Canada as an ambassador for space would be amazing.
Well, I think certainly the launch next week ushers in a new era of space exploration and travel, doesn't it? I mean, the use of a commercial rocket to go to the International Space Station is surely just the first step in terms of establishing a base on the moon and then traveling further to Mars, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the other interesting, inspiring, amazing part of this is commercial spaceflight is opening up. And what the question I like to ask and ponder about is when access to space becomes ubiquitous, what follows next from opening up that platform? Right now it's pilots, it's scientists, um, it's doctors who go to space. It's very, very STEM oriented. But once we empower any man or woman to be able to go to space, and to do it easily, how does that alter our use of space? What do the entrepreneurs, what do the artists, what do the athletes, what will they do in space? So I think as we look at the dawn of the era of commercial space flight, my hope is, and I believe that this is just the beginning, of a lot of good things to come from having access to space as a widespread platform.
So, Shawna, given your interests and your portfolio of sort of achievements, you must be considered, even amongst your peer group, to be a bit of an outlier, a bit of a maverick. Would that be true?
I would say that my career path has been unusual. I've never been described as quote unquote unusual per se, but I would say that shoe fits very much.
I mean, has the phrase maverick ever been attached to your name?
No, I've never been called a maverick before, but given the association with the movie Top Gun, I'll take it.
I think there is a culture in medicine, perhaps less so than in other career pathways, where you're expected to conform and follow a pathway. but I see some of the best clinicians that I come into contact personally, do have quite a portfolio of interests, and actually expeditions and being in the outdoors and adventure and humanitarian, actually seems to make them as individuals better clinicians because they're doing medicine, but they're also doing it outside of their career, and it gives them a sense of belonging and purpose, which would otherwise not be there.
That's a really good point, and I think that touches on the bigger point of the value of supportive environments. So, now that you mention it, I was extremely atypical and unusual even throughout med school in that I probably took more time off than anyone in medical school, certainly within my class, to go to these space conferences, to give talks across the world, to intern at NASA. But I did it with the full support of the medical faculty, and I think that speaks to the value of having the environment that lets you do these things. Because, I had colleagues at other medical schools where the environment wasn't supportive like that. I had a colleague who had the exact same in NASA internship who got it maybe a year or two before I did. But they said it doesn't fit into our clinical schedule, so we won't let you go. I had colleagues at other medical schools who were appointed to the UN Global Health Committee as a medical student, which is incredibly, prestigious and important and a huge achievement as a medical student. But again, because it required them to miss class, they were told it would be a professionalism issue if they missed class for that. Whereas coming back to my experience in medical school, absolutely going to NASA interfered with my clinical schedule. It required me to miss my fourth year comprehensive exam. And they just said, okay, as long as you study on your own, we'll let you write the exam later. But we think NASA sounds like a great opportunity. And so when we talk about being atypical, we also have to, I personally have to acknowledge the environments that let me be atypical and unusual and do unusual things that were, outside the norm, but also they could see the value in that. I was able to do a lot because of the people who believed in the value of what I was doing. And my message to medical schools and educational institutions is support that excellence. Look outside the box, because, like we talked about earlier, we as individuals can do great things, but we have to acknowledge that none of us does this alone. We do it because of the environments that let us. We do it because of the teams that build us. We do it because of the family and friends that support us along the way. So if I'm unusual, I have to give credit, share that unusual credit with the people who've let me be unusual.
The people that support you on the way are certainly the people that open your eyes and open the doors to opportunity, aren't they? And I think, you know, I get the sense that the Canadian Space Agency will be opening its recruitment doors fairly soon, and we want to wish you the very best of luck in the first application that you put in, because I know it's going to be first on their desk. But it's been brilliant talking to you, Shawna, and I hope that we get to do so again soon, and I hope that we get you to present at the WEM conference this year in whatever form that takes. We haven't quite decided how that's going to go yet, but I know how busy you are, so thank you for your time today. And there's so many topics there that we could pick up and expand on in future podcasts, and also at the conference itself. But you're a true inspiration to younger medics coming up behind you, and thank you for sharing your time, but also some of your life lessons thus far.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was my extreme pleasure to be on the podcast, and yeah, I definitely hope to be involved with WEM in whatever format it takes later this year.
Brilliant. Thank you, Shawna.